Imagine living your life after 50 and feeling energized and excited about your future. Welcome to the Women in the Middle podcast, the podcast for women who are ready to figure out what they want and create the life they deserve. Here's your host and Master Certified Life Coach, Susie Rosenstein.
Welcome back to the podcast Women in the Middle. I'm your host, Susie Rosenstein, your Master Certified Coach and Midlife Mentor, and I'm so glad to be here with you again for this week's episode, which is about having less stress and more conversations about end-of-life planning with Marni Blank. This episode is especially for you if you've been struggling with how to talk to your parents about their wishes about when they die and what you need to know to support them through this phase. I know this is a really important thing to talk about for so many reasons. It's a topic that can be really, really challenging to muddle through on your own and just to muddle through in general. It's something to get organized about, so much to think about and so stressful. So we are going there. You're going to love my guest, and she makes it all much more manageable. But just quick, I have a question for you. Are you ready to finally put yourself first? I wonder if you even know what that means. I have a gift for you to help. It's a free guide called Top 10 Questions to Reimagine Your Life After 50. It's like an easy journaling exercise to really help you discover how to get unstuck and feel happier in midlife, to create more confidence so that you can capitalize on your newfound clarity about what you want, to finally connect with your heart and find yourself again. Those kinds of things. So make sure to grab your free download by heading over to www.susierosenstein.com/10 questions. Okay, now let me tell you about my amazing guest on this episode. Marni Blank is the founder of Begin with the End. She is a recovering lawyer, mediator, death doula, and after-loss consultant. Her services are curated to empower individuals and families to prepare for logistical and emotional aspects of death, dying, and grief. This can include accountability in completing end-of-life decisions and documents, facilitating family conversations, getting your important documents and digital life organized, and legacy projects. For families in grief, she offers after-loss support to help overwhelmed executors and families work through the paperwork and logistics to close the estate. Marni splits her time between Brooklyn, New York, and upstate New York. Her snuggly but mischievous pup Penny keeps her company. Okay, now let's dive into this week's episode. Hi, Marni. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Women in the Middle podcast.
Thanks for having me, Susie.
Now, I was really excited to have you on today because you are helping people do some of the potentially most important and challenging and even serious work they may ever do, completely unprepared for it. And as they go forward and prepare this logistical and emotional aspects of death, dying, and grief for people that they love. And I know that we're going to try to have a little bit of fun today just because, we don't want to have a podcast that's just full of crying and sadness. But it is really heavy duty what you do. So let's start by you telling us a little bit about why you're so passionate about this topic.
Definitely. And it doesn't all have to be heavy duty and dark. It really is, thinking about your legacy and how you want to be remembered. And that can be really fun. But
Thank
for
you.
Me,
good.
Of course. For me, I was at my day job in 2018, just at a work event, unrelated to this field at all. And I got a call from a hospital that my mom had been in a freak car accident. And, the first thing I thought, other than is she okay, was, oh my gosh, I have some of her paperwork sitting on my desk that I was supposed to get signed and notarized that I hadn't done. And I am a lawyer by background. I'm smart, I'm organized, I know how important these things are. And I had a mental block around dealing with paperwork that had to do with my mom's eventual death. And so in that moment of needing to get to the hospital, I had to scramble and do certain things and make sure certain things were set up before I could be there. And that is not the time that you want to be thinking about these things. And so I will fast forward to say that my mom ended up being okay, but in the ensuing months of figuring out, rehabilitation center, insurance, her pets. She had just gotten a kitten the week before and she had a dog. Mail, running her household, running my life, and still having my own business. And my mother was out of state. It was incredibly overwhelming. And I wish that I had had someone there sort of to guide me through this and to be there and to offer me advice. And so I ended up going to this work sort of because I wanted to provide what I didn't have in that moment. And also because this experience, along with, a health emergency that my father ended up having a few years later, really sort of brought to light conversations that we hadn't had in our family that we really needed to be having. And we have had many of those conversations now, and it's sort of kind of mainstream in our family, but really recognizing that a lot of families aren't having these conversations. And so how can we start talking about this more, both like in our families and in our communities and in our friend groups? So I ended up going to death doula training in 2020 to really sort of get more of a sense of death and dying and grief, and what does that mean for me and my family, and what does that mean sort of more, holistically in our society as our population age. And I sort of started my career from there.
Well, one thing that strikes me is there's just so much that we don't even know that we need to know. And at least as a lawyer, you probably had a good sense, like you had some papers on your desk already that you knew what to do with. You just hadn't done them. But there's this sense that unless you've been through it before, you don't even know what to ask. Like, I remember the first time I even heard the word death doula. That was new to me. I don't think most people even know that's a thing, or that they can get some guidance from somebody who's not a lawyer necessarily. I mean, I think it helps you, but you don't have to be a lawyer to get help with this, or somebody from a home or a funeral home, or like, who helps you with this sort of thing? I don't think people know that they can even get this kind of help if it's not a family member,
Yeah, I think it's such a good point. Death and dying and grief are really sort of in the shadows of our society. We don't like to talk about it. It's not something that, we're taught to have the conversation around. And so it's only natural that people have a little apprehension around it or don't want to talk about it, because you're right. We don't know what we don't know. And it's really hard to sort of start these conversations when you don't know where to begin. And that's sort of where I've found it helpful to jump in, because, fast forwarding, what a death doula is a non-medical professional who helps with the logistical, the emotional, and the spiritual aspects of death and dying and grief. And so we're sort of a wealth of knowledge to get people more comfortable with this conversation. But even within that, there are many niches. For me, a lot of what I do is help people of all ages plan in advance, but more specifically, people, in their midlife who may have gone through some sort of transition, whether it's getting married, getting divorced, having a healthcare diagnosis, losing a spouse, or starting to think about how to help their aging parents. And so how can we start getting comfortable with some of the things that we haven't talked about in our family? And so you're right that, a lot of people, when they think about end of life planning, they're thinking about, a will, I need a will or a trust. And those are great. And everyone should have one of those, even though only 33% of the adult population have those documents in place. But more importantly, thinking about your healthcare wishes. What's most important to you as you age in terms of health and wellness? Is it, do you want, who do you want to be making medical decisions for you if you're unable? And that's a healthcare proxy. Or having a living will, which is sort of the document that would go along with that, stating your wishes. Do I want medical intervention if something were to happen? Is longevity more important, or is it the quality of life, sort of quality versus quantity of life at the end? Do you want to be an organ donor? There are all these different, questions and conversations in our family that we need to be having. And sometimes you just need a guide to help have those conversations.
Oh, who doesn't like to have their hand held?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, and then there's always the weird questions too, is like, do you have money hidden anywhere?
It's so, I mean, yes, Susie, I have worked with people. I've worked with people where the parent will have said casually to the child, just make sure that you're looking in pocketbooks and closets. I've hidden money around the apartment. And you're like, well, what? Why are we? I don't want to have a treasure map. Like, let's have this conversation. Where is the money? Or, having a safe deposit box that maybe you haven't shared where the key is or where, which bank it's at. There's a lot of issues here with, if you're not sharing this information, if you're not writing it down and, sharing it, that information often lives in our heads and our brains. And how do we share that information with the people who will eventually need to know about it?
Exactly. And then the sibling thing comes up too, like depending on how many children or adult children, siblings that you have, and how to make sure that everybody's involved or not. And if you don't have siblings, it's a lot of responsibility. And when people live out of town or out of country, there's issues with that too, with the siblings. So what comes up in your world about that?
Yeah, family dynamics are a big part of what I'm working with. In the best of circumstances, I'm working with families as a whole where we have the, adult children, if there's more than one, and the parents, and we're having these conversations together. And really talking about who are the right people for the right roles. So perhaps one person is best under, pressure to be making those sort of healthcare decisions, advocating, and, can be curious and ask the right questions if something were to happen to someone and they need medical help. Whereas maybe the other sibling is better with numbers, better with finances, and would be a better fit to be the power of attorney. And so it is sort of making sure that people are involved as much as they want to be, but thinking about family dynamics. Oftentimes we have different relationships with our parents, different relationships with our siblings. And the issue of fairness comes up a lot. And what does that mean? Like you said, sometimes there will be one child who lives closer to the parents and may take on more of the responsibility of the day-to-day, coming in, checking, helping get to medical appointments and more hands on the ground. Whereas, another child may have moved across the country. How can it be that they sort of both take on roles, whether it's, the person farther away, maybe they're contributing more financially, maybe they're, doing the Amazon packages and buying things, from afar, sort of how can you make sure that both people are involved and on the same page so that there's information being flowed both directions, so everyone can be a part of it. But also recognizing that there are sometimes things that cause people to not want to be involved. And how can you plan with that in mind also?
That's a really good point. Not everybody has the same capacity in different situations. And then there's some people who are really good at stuff that you wouldn't want to do. And you're happy that they can help do the finances or the books or clean a basement,
Yes.
any of those things.
Yeah, we all have our strong suits and we should be playing to those. You also might be good at something and not want to do it. And that's also okay. And to have permission to have certain boundaries as well, even if that is your strong suit.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Now, what do you think is going on with women in midlife that this is such a big deal? I mean, it definitely comes up in my community all the time. And I don't know. I just think it's like, it almost seems like a big secret in some ways. And I know it's not really a secret, that any of us just need to open up our eyes a little bit to anticipate it, but it kind of reminds me of breastfeeding. Like, we all knew that it may not go smoothly, but we didn't talk about it as much as we did just getting through the 9 months and having the baby. And I kind of get that sense that you hinted at it a little bit too, that death and death planning and coping with the end is really uncomfortable for many. And it often comes at a time of extreme stress. It's kind of interesting in my community. It seems almost like there are waves where several clients are dealing with this at the same time. And right now it's in one of those waves. And it's great support. Everybody's finding so much support to be able to talk to somebody who's just a little bit ahead of them, or be able to be a mentor and offer a little bit of help. So what do you see about the 50 plus crowd and their preparedness?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good point, and it's so amazing that you're creating a community. You have a community who are talking about these, and exactly what you're saying, that sometimes people are just slightly ahead of you, but can give you that solace or that recognition that what you're feeling is normal. That can just be a world of difference when you're struggling. But what I see with the over 50 is there are, so many people now in this sandwich generation, this idea of, caring for younger children, or even adult children, quite honestly, and dealing with aging parents, and this being stuck in the middle of, your time and attention are going to both places, but also you are working or you're not working, but you have a life of your own. And how can you be managing both your responsibilities to your children, to your parents, and to yourself, and creating a life that you are excited to be living? And so a lot of pressure falls on people in the over 50 crowd of, feeling pulled in all of these different directions and not necessarily having the space to breathe and, take a step back and say, okay, I know I have these responsibilities, but how can I also make time for myself and that self-care? And a lot of things are going on where there's this caregiving often falls to women. It has been historically so. It continues to be. That's not to say that men do not caregive. My father, who is 72, is actively caregiving for my 102-year-old grandmother. And so I give men credit where credit is due. But there is this idea of eldest daughter syndrome in a way where, we keep a lot of information of the family, whether we have children or don't have children, of the family unit in our, we're keeping it going. We have a lot of those, practical things that we're thinking about, but we're also carrying all of the emotional aspects of these different dynamics as well. And so I find it so important and empowering for people to be actively having conversations about planning for the future, whether it's for your loved ones or for yourself, because then you get to drive the boat. Then it's not a total mystery. Then you get to sort of say, okay, if this is where I want to be in retirement, or if this is how I want to live out my days, where am I now? Where, how are my finances? How is my mental health? Where am I now? And how can I steer the ship in the right direction? And if things aren't going according to plan, how can I get the support so that I can get there?
I love what you just said. Planning out. This is one of the exercises I do with my clients. So my midlife gals, is we don't just make a plan about the future, but we plug in relevant benchmarks, like how old will the kids be? Will you be paying tuition? Where will your mortgage be? How old will your parents be? To start to really say that it's not just, this is my 5-year plan, but you have to take these other ideas into your brain, or it's just not reality. And I don't know if you know, but I have another podcast called Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs, the reality of running a business when you are over 50. And for sure, caring for aging parents is one of the most unpredictable, intense things that goes on that can really affect the way you typically want to run your business for a period of time. And it could be an extended period of time.
It's so true. Running a business it's hard in the best of circumstances.
Right.
And you're wearing all the hats or you're doing all the problem solving. And when you add in, caregiving, whether it's for a child or an aging parent, it is an added level of question marks added to the business. And how are you setting your business up for longevity and success along with yourself? So, how is your digital life organized? And where are you keeping all of that important client information if something were to happen to you? How are you getting that support both in your personal life, but also making sure that you're set up to make sure that your business continues to run if something were to happen for exactly, you said, extended period of time? We don't we can't predict the future, but we do know that it's ever changing. And how can we be able to be adaptable to when something either goes wrong, or maybe it's not wrong, it's just part of life that that we have to step in and be responsible for, but also need to keep our own, all of the plates continuing to spin? Or how can we have a gentle landing so that, things aren't falling apart? Maybe there's just a pause, a gentle pause, but like it's planning so that you can live freely now, knowing that you've thought ahead to what's going to happen down the line.
Yeah, I love that. I like to call it a midlife operating system. That's what's required. So the operating system that got us from 20 to 50 isn't the same operating system for our life and our business and our well-being that's required to go forward after 50. And so dealing with aging parents, if you are fortunate enough to have them still, is definitely something that has to be part of your plan. Like if you also, a question I ask my clients regularly, including this week, is to think about what kind of a daughter you want to be so that you don't have regrets. So what kind of a daughter do you want to be at this age and stage so you don't have regrets? And it really gets you thinking, and it should get you thinking, right?
Yeah, it does. And I have started to live my life like that now. I'm not quite there. I'm 41. But, my parents have each had health issues that make me very aware of the time that I have with them. And so, like you're saying, my dad and I are going on a trip to Arizona to do some national parks at the end of the month. I'm making time and thinking about, how do I want to live my life now, but also how do I want to create memories with my family and have those experiences now while everyone is healthy enough to do those things.
Thank you so much for sharing that. In your notes, you also mentioned aging solo. So does that mean being an only child?
Aging solo can mean many different things. And for many solo agers, it can mean, yes, that you either don't have siblings, or you might have siblings, but you aren't close to your family, or you no longer have, maybe you were always single. Maybe you were married and now you're divorced. Maybe you had a partner and they've passed away. There are many reasons why people end up aging solo, some by choice, some by circumstance. But how are you thinking about the future? And I think everyone should do this thought exercise, whether you're partnered or not, because we just don't know what the future is going to bring. So how can you be planning and creating a sense of community and those support resources as if you were aging on your own? So, what are the community groups in your area? Are there places for active seniors? Are there book clubs? Who's your medical support system? And if you end up thinking that you're going to need help at home, in advance, just taking a look at what are those like options and opportunities around you. As we age, it can be more and more lonely as our social circles get smaller. And so how are you planning in advance to keep those relationships, those friend groups, like very active? And whether you live close to people or not, having those weekly FaceTime dates with your friends or your loved ones. So
it's so important.
And sometimes people are aging solo because their children are, living in another country or across the state. It doesn't mean that you're totally alone. It just means that you're thinking about the future and taking proactive steps yourself and not waiting for other people to come in and make those plans for you.
That's exactly it. And also, just in general, you can't just wait for your exciting life to happen to you. You need to create the exciting life that you want. And a lot of times that means you planning in advance, committing to your plan, and initiating. And this initiation seems to be a stumbling block for many, because we're just so in our autopilot thinking, la da da, just going on. Oh, another 10 years went by. How did that happen? I don't know. And it just goes on like that. So I'm really glad you said that, because having meaningful relationships is shown. That long Harvard study showed this, that one of the keys to being happy in your next chapter, being happy in life, is developing meaningful relationships, nurturing those meaningful relationships. And so many women come into my world as a midlife coach complaining about this, that they don't have the friendships that they used to have. And, friendships, even if you don't have the right kind of friend that you're looking for now, if you nurture that relationship now, this could go on for 20 or 30 years. When you're really having some trouble and some challenges in your life, like exactly what you're talking about, when you lose a parent, it can be really, really, well, I don't want to minimize it by explaining how difficult it can be and challenging, but it can really shake you up. It can be a wake-up call. It can be jarring, and it's not something that you just get over in a week or 2 or 3, right? Like it really goes on, and you do need that support network.
Yeah, it can be very isolating, and it's making sure that you've really been intentional about making these support systems for you and keeping them up. It's not a set it and forget it thing. Friendships and relationships take time, they take energy. And we can still continue to make friends as we age. This is not something that, yes, sometimes it's harder, but there's so many activities. There's walking groups, there's pickleball, there's art classes.
Pickleball. Oh my gosh. Pickleball is changing things in the world. Oh my gosh.
I've only done it once. I loved it. I'm excited for it. But yeah, there's all different kinds of ways to create that support system. It's also getting a good therapist or a mindful coach or any kind of coach. It doesn't have to just be friends. It can be a variety of professionals and friends that are surrounding you to give you that support.
100%. Yeah.
One activity, Susie, I love to do with clients, and maybe you'll think this is a little strange, but I like to have the thought exercise of like, if you think down the line to what you would want your obituary to say, what would it say? And write it as if it's already happened. So, if she wrote a best-selling book, she was a loving, parent and daughter, whatever it is, whatever your life goals are, and then really taking a step back and say, okay, if this is really what my heart desires to be at the end, where am I now in that journey?
Exactly.
And okay, am I writing, 1,000 words a week? Whatever it is, what am I doing to make sure that when I get to the end, I've lived a life without regrets and I've done it the way I've wanted to do it?
Oh, I love that you suggested that, because again, sometimes if you just give somebody a journal prompt, they may not get at the real core issue. But when you do something like very tangible, like thinking about writing your obituary, that's jarring because you are dead. And I have to say, you're imagining you're dead. I have to say, in my situation, I lost both my parents as a child, not together. So there were 2 incidents when I was 5 and when I was 12. And, I grew up watching grandparents grieving adult children. And I also grew up really appreciating the gift of life and really understanding that not everybody has the privilege to age. So while you have the privilege to age, what's the gap between what you really want and where you're at? And are you doing any of those things? Like a lot of women also talk to me about hobbies. If you want to golf in retirement or play pickleball, you got to start learning the craft or the sport or whatever it is.
Yes.
It's not just gonna, I'm 62 now and I'm gonna go play some golf. I don't play golf. I don't know exactly how it works, but you get the point. So anyway, you have to start living your life now and not waiting for somebody fun to invite you in,
Oh, that is such a good point. We're not guaranteed long lives, and that's not meant to scare anyone. It's meant to be a wake-up call that like, it's now. And if you've always wanted to learn Spanish, get on Duolingo, or,
Right.
if you want to do pickleball in your elder years, take one lesson a month, however you can fit it in. I know that, people in this middle age are very busy. There are a lot of things going on. And so you don't have to devote your whole life to, crafts, but can you do little things that start to get you to where you want to be and to not wait for those things?
Okay. The one question I really want you to go into with specifics is, how do you actually begin those difficult conversations? Because this is the type of thing where I know somebody listening right now is cringing and they're thinking, I just can't ask that question, or I'm not comfortable talking about money with my parents, or this is too scary. I can't even think about death. So how do you
Yeah.
start these conversations?
I think, like most things, it's starting with yourself. How are you starting to plan for yourself so that you can then bring that conversations to your loved ones? So maybe it means you're contacting a financial advisor or planner if you don't have one and starting to look at your finances. What do your finances look like and how are you preparing for the future? Have you set up a will or a healthcare proxy and started to think about your own wishes? Because then it's sort of an opener to have those conversations with your aging loved ones. So it's, Mom, I was actually just having a conversation with my advisor and he was talking to me about, planning for retirement. I'm curious, have you started to have those conversations, with Dad, or, whether you want to tell me specifics or not, like, where are you at in that process? Do you have a will? Has it been updated recently? And so it's sort of, starting slowly by saying, I'm working on this. I'm starting to have this conversation with my friend group, and I wanted to talk to you about it. And sometimes it's going to take a few tries. Sometimes you're going to get shut down. And my advice is really just slowly but surely, start to bring these things just more into the conversations, and it will become more natural. But there's also so many great resources out there that are now available in modern day culture, TV shows that are addressing grief or loss. There are podcasts like Anderson Cooper's podcast,
oh my
All
gosh.
There Is, which
I could barely
breaks
walk
my
after.
I know.
I could barely function.
But it's really, again, like, how are these conversations coming up around us? There's a great website called the Conversation Project that's all about how to have these conversations. And so there are resources out there to sort of get you started, but it can be really uncomfortable, but it's sort of putting it back to say, Mom, Dad, it would be a gift to know because I'm feeling anxious about it. I'm feeling stressed about it. And any information that we can be sharing would be helpful because I'm worried about the future. And so it's not about how much money they have. It's not about those things. It's really about what do I need to know about your wishes, your values? Like, how can I make sure that I'm honoring you and making sure that you are taken care of? And so that we can be thinking about these things while everyone is relatively young and healthy, so that we're not getting to a moment of stress or anxiety or overwhelm where decisions aren't best made in those scenarios. Decisions are best made when you can think ahead and be thoughtful about
Absolutely. So good. So we're not going to wait for a crisis. And I think what I hear you saying is that it's really an act of not only self-care to have these conversations, but also an expression of love, because it is around your desire to honor and understand. Well, first understand and then honor their wishes. Like, how beautiful is that to think about it instead of, oh, I'm so scared and worried. I don't know, so uncomfortable, versus how can I take care of myself and how can I honor my parents?
It really is. It is the greatest act of love. I do a lot with helping families after a loss deal with all the paperwork and logistics. And let me tell you, when people haven't planned, it is a nightmare. It is just an added layer of trauma and stress on top of grief that a family needs to deal with when dealing with all of the logistics and the paperwork after a passing. And so if things are tied neatly with a bow, or even if they're not fully tied neatly with a bow, but they are, packaged in a way that is understandable, you are taking an extra layer of stress off of your loved one's plates. And it makes all the world of difference. And when you see what happens after a loss, when things have not been talked about or planned, or the confusion, it makes you just more, I'm just so passionate about helping people think about these things in advance because I see what happens when you don't.
Yeah, that's so good. And one last point before we wrap up and give your contact information. I was delighted to hear you talk about pets at the beginning of our conversation. And I think it's so important to think about that and to have that discussion with what would happen to your loved one's pets should
Yes.
they pass.
Yeah. Pets are family members. They're very important. And I've seen often, when people are starting to take these steps of planning, whether for themselves or for others, they often get stuck on who will take care of my animals. And it might stop the whole process if people are blocked around it. Because this is a beloved member of your family. And so it really does take effort to think about these things. And so, there are ways in which, first of all, be thinking about who's in your network. Who do you trust to take care of your pet? Is it, a sibling? Is it a best friend? Who would you want to take care of it? And also making sure that you have the documents set up. Do you have, in your important folder of information, do you have their veterinary information? Do you have their likes and dislikes? Do you have, any, sensitivities, whether it's to, other dogs or anything. So making sure that there's, the information about your pet so that if something were to happen, that someone else also has all of that information to go by. But also, when it comes to if you have a parent who has an animal, again, who is around them that can be a resource? Is it a neighbor who can start, helping walk the dog? If, a parent is aging and they're not able to do it, are there dog walking services? It's thinking in advance, just like as you would with caregiving for a parent. How are you making sure that the things that are surrounding them are loved and cared for as well? And then there are ways in which, if you are meeting with an attorney, you can set up a trust or set aside a certain amount of money for your pet or for the person who's taking care of your pet. Because oftentimes pets are very expensive. It
Yes.
could be a $1,200, vet visit when my dog, accidentally ate rat poison a year ago, So these things come up. And so people may be a little hesitant to take on an animal with that added, financial responsibility. So how are you making sure that you're alleviating that by making sure that you are setting them up for success by leaving money to take care of them as well?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that because exactly. I mean, people really do. We really worry about our pets. And
Yes.
they are members of our family. There's no question about it. So thank you so much for that. So Marni, how can people best get a hold of you?
Yeah. So I am, my email is Marni, Marni at beginwiththeend.co. My website is beginwiththeend.co. And I always offer a free 20-minute session for anyone who just wants to pick my brain, who has questions and wants to learn more. But I also have a lot of free offerings on my website, getting your important information and documents organized and a checklist for that, or thinking about legacy projects. And so check it out. There's a lot of good information that's just available on there as well.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Marni. This information, our interview today was awesome. And it's, it can be a real drag. So you definitely want to do what you can in advance because it is very difficult and challenging and also one of the most important things that you can do. So if you can manage that experience a little bit more intentionally, it benefits you and the people who love you too.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having these conversations because it really is important. Thank you for having a space to talk about it.
So welcome. Talk to you soon. Okay, that's it for this episode. I know that was a lot, but it's important information that will absolutely help you feel more prepared. Now, as you know, my focus as a midlife coach is to help you waste less time spinning and feeling stuck. This is what regret-proofing your life is all about. Remember, being the queen of your brain domain is the best way to be, and midlife transformation coaching is the fastest way to rediscover joy and purpose after 50. I can help you. This is exactly what we're up to in my Women in the Middle Academy group coaching program. So if you'd like to see if working together is a good fit for you, either in the Academy or privately, head over to www.talktosusie.com and book your free momentum call and we will chat. Now for show notes and links, go to www.susierosenstein.com and click on the podcast tab and look for episode 405. You'll also see a link there for my new show, The Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs, which is all about the reality of running your business when you're a midlife gal. It's also on iTunes, Spotify, and all the places. Let's do this, ladies. It's time for you to put yourself first, one thought at a time. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.